Well, we're going to try to knit together this story. Everyone is well aware that Saul is filled at this moment in his life with major jealousy. His jealousy is because he is afraid that David is going to become the next king. He well understands that God has rejected His kingdom for generations to come. He also understands now that God has rejected him as king. He knows someone has been anointed. And now he seems to have figured out that it's David, and he is afraid that David's going to take away his kingdom. So in his jealousy, a jealousy that knows no boundaries, he decides to murder David. Only like so many who are in this situation, he doesn't want everyone else to know. At least in the beginning, he doesn't want everyone else to know. So he comes up with a scheme. And we are wonderful, aren't we, at coming up with schemes to camouflage our true intent? And he has this daughter, his oldest daughter, and he says, I will give her in marriage to David. And David can go out, therefore, and fight more battles as a son-in-law to the king, and surely the Philistines along the way will kill him. I'll get rid of him that way. That's kind of interesting. That daughter should have been given to David a long time ago. Do you remember the reason? Because on the battlefield with Goliath, Saul had said, anyone who goes out and fights and wins, I'll give him my daughter in marriage. It should have happened, but it hasn't. And so Saul makes this outstanding offer. What he underestimates is the character and the sense of honor locked inside of David. He never dreams that David would say no to such an offer. For David says, how can I become a son-in-law to the king? I come from a little family and I come from a little clan. How could I be a son-in-law to the king of Israel? And I think that's so interesting because had I been in David's situation, I might have even felt like I truly deserved to be a son-in-law of the king. Because it was promised on the battlefield when I killed Goliath. And now I'm the Goliath killer, and I have had all these victories all over everywhere against the Philistines, and the women stand out in the streets and they sing praises to my name. Why shouldn't I be a son-in-law of the king? But David knows better than to think that you and I deserve anything. He knows better than to think like that. He is a man of honor. He is a man of character. And he says no. Now, it's right next, the next verse after chapter 7, verse 17. It's right there, but surely some time passes. We don't know how much time has passed. And Saul finds out that his other daughter, Michal, is in love with David. Now, I assume you pronounce her name Michal. It could be Michal. I don't know how to pronounce any of those Bible names. But she's in love with David. And so Saul thinks, all right, I'll give her in marriage, only this time I'll appeal to David's sense of honor, and I will make a request. You go out and bring me 100 foreskins of Philistine soldiers. In other words, you go out and kill 100 Philistine soldiers and bring back evidence that they're dead. Well, that does appeal to David's sense of honor. Now, Saul thinks all the while David will get killed in this deal. He'll not make it. But you know what David does? You remember? He goes out and kills 200 Philistine soldiers and brings back the evidence to Saul. And Saul's plan is foiled again, and you come to the end of chapter 18, and now you begin chapter 19, and Saul is tired of hiding the fact that he wants David dead. No longer is he going to do it in some kind of a secretive way. And so he says to his oldest son, Jonathan, and says to the soldiers, go kill David. But Jonathan, do you remember Jonathan? You remember Jonathan and David, how they have such a special friendship? And Jonathan will rise up against his father saying, Dad, please, Father, please, don't do this. He's not done anything deserving of death. And Saul listens to Jonathan. And he says, okay, I will not put him to death. Everything seems fine for a while. But Saul falls into another one of those episodes, as I call it. The evil spirit comes upon Saul. And he is greatly tormented in some fashion, though it does not describe for us how he is tormented. He's tormented. And David comes and begins to play the harp, as he has done so often through a long period of time now, to bring soothing to Saul. And again, I remind you of the special character. This person of honor goes again to sit and play the harp for this deranged king when he is the most popular person in Israel. There is no one known better than David in all of Israel. He is the Goliath killer, the giant killer. He is the military hero. And yet this man with a shepherd heart, a servant heart, goes and plays the harp. But something's wrong. He reaches over once again like he had done earlier and grabs a spear and he thrusts it at David. And David moves out of the way. And Saul is now returning to this vengeance of wanting to destroy David. David will end up going to his house where he and, as I call her, Michal live. And Saul sends his soldiers to their house to take David captive and to bring him back and to kill him. And Michal and David find out about it. And she takes a rope and she puts it out the window. And she lowers David out the window so that David can escape. And she takes some kind of statue and puts it in the bed and covers it over and puts something like hair on the head of the statue. And the soldiers come and she said, well, you can't take him now. He's in bed. He's sick. And the soldiers go back to Saul. And Saul says, I don't care, sick or not, you go get him and bring him here. And they go back and they discover that they have been tricked. They have been deceived. And David has made his escape. Can you guess where he might have gone? It's a touching thought, though we have no detail. He goes to where the old leader, judge, prophet Samuel is. He goes to see that old man who a long time ago now poured that oil on his head and said, you will someday be the king over this nation. Wouldn't you love to know the conversation? Wouldn't you love to know what David is saying to Samuel and Samuel in return is saying to David? But we don't have that. Now we begin chapter 20. And in chapter 20, I want you to pay attention to the very first verse. I want you to pay attention to all of it, but I want you to, as you listen to this first verse, I want you to see if you can feel what David's feeling. I want you to see if you can put yourself in a little bit of his spot and sense the despair and sense the discouragement. He says, he's talking to Jonathan, his trusted friend. What have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he is trying to kill me? Now, Do you capture those words? What have I done? The truth of the matter is, he's done nothing to deserve what Saul is doing to him. What is my crime? There is no crime. May I take just a moment to remind you that it happens so often in this life that we have troubles that pile upon us and they are not of our own making. Now, some of my troubles are of my own making. It's due to my own fault, my own sin. But there are other times that things come and we can't explain and we don't know, but we feel the terrible result of these troubles. So last Tuesday, I was talking to a person or two from a university setting, and you could feel, you could hear, you could see the discouragement and the despair that they were having. On Wednesday, I traveled to Midland, Texas. I spent some time with a metal fabrication business that spends most of their time working for oil fields. And their revenues are 50% right now what they were a year ago. Their employees are less than 50%. And you could listen to them and you could hear and you thought about all those employees that were unemployed right now due to nothing that they had done. And then Thursday and Friday I was with a major hospital system. There are two major hospital systems in Lubbock, Texas. This is the one who seems to have risen to the top. And they put together at their own will, at their own initiative, at their own cost, a free mobile clinic. And so they had thousands and thousands and thousands of people come through starting in March, and they just ended it. And even their executives are out there, they had lines of cars for blocks, and they were directing traffic. And they said, all the while, all of our clinics, the revenue has dropped, and people have been put on part-time pay. And they said, you can't understand the number of people coming to us wanting jobs right now. They've been out of jobs for so long. And you could see their despair and the discouragement. And I talked to a person who owns commercial real estate the week before, massive amount of commercial real estate. And he talked about how many, almost all of his occupiers, the people who had leased space from him, were behind on their lease payments. And now he's having to renegotiate with them lease arrangements, go to the banks and renegotiate loan agreements. And he says it's so stressful. He said, I haven't stressed like this since 1982 when the major oil field collapsed. And in 1982, I was a breath away from bankruptcy. I'm telling you, I can go on and on. You know what? I'm talking about faraway places. It's in this building right here. It's in this building right here among some of you that to no fault of your own, nothing you did, and yet there is major hardship been placed upon you. And like David, you may be saying, what have I done? What crime have I committed? How is it that I've done anything to have what's happening here? Jonathan and David have a long talk in chapter 20. Jonathan, as a dear friend, does his best to reassure David. He says to David, my father talks to me about everything. I'll talk to him on your behalf. In the midst of that conversation, Jonathan apparently realizes completely and fully that David will be the next king. And so they talk about that. I want you to listen to what Jonathan will request of David. Chapter 20. Looks like verses 14 and 15, though I can't see those numbers actually. But show me your unfailing kindness, like the Lord's kindness, as long as I live, so that I may not be killed. Do not ever cut off your kindness from my family. You know what he's thinking? You know what Jonathan's realizing? David, you're going to be king. When a new king comes to the throne, what always happens is they kill the previous dynasty. And I'll be killed and all my family be killed. Will you please not kill me? And will you please remember kindness toward my family, the kind of kindness that the Lord has shown you? And now they make a plot. The end of the plot is this. If I talk to my father, how are you going to know, David, if it's okay to come home or it's not okay to come home? Well, here's how we'll do it. I'll go out in the evening and I'll shoot 2 arrows the day after the new moon festival. And I'll tell my little attendant to go retrieve the arrows. And as he goes and retrieves the arrows, and I'll say to him, no, come back this way. They're not that far. You'll know it's fine to come back home. Everything is fine. But if I say to this young man, no, the arrows are farther. Go farther. You'll know you've got to run. Well, the arrows are shot. David is hiding. He's listening so very carefully. He's hoping that Jonathan will call out and say to the young man, come back this direction. It's not what happens. Jonathan and Saul have had the conversation. It was ugly. It was wrong. It didn't work. And so Jonathan calls out, go farther. And now David leaves. And for the next several years, he will be on the run. For the next long period of time, he is going to be so very miserable. All because one man was filled with jealousy and inflicted such harm upon him. Next Sunday, the Lord willing, we will see David in this running mode making such a giant, ugly mistake. And the next Sunday, hopefully, we will explain a principle born out of that story that's one of the most important principles I know about life. And we'll show it on the screen so that everybody can see it. But for right now, I only want to remind you of 2 or 3 things in this morning's lesson. I want to remind you of how important it is that no matter what happens to us, we remain to be people of character and people of honor, no matter what. And if you want to learn how to be a person of character and honor, you can look at David's life, but it's not the best place to look. Move over to the New Testament and read about the life of Jesus. And read what he says in just that Sermon on the Mount. And he's talking about how to live a life of character, a life that will be honorable regardless. Yes, I hope all of us realize the danger of letting just a little jealousy enter into our heart. Because jealousy and its associated evil know no bounds. They'll take you to places that you never should go. But here's the one most important point I want you to leave with today. What Jonathan says to David is so very applicable to our lives. In effect, he says, will you show me the Lord's kindness that the Lord has shown to you? Now, if you move over to the New Testament, we as people of God now are taught what we have received from God, we are supposed to share with other people. Or what God does for us, we are to duplicate in our relationships with other people. So we are people who walk in this world showing everyone the delightful life, the delightful things that God has done for us because we do them for others.